How you doing, everybody? Um, Got to check the sound and the video, make sure everything is working okay. Can you hear me all right? And is the video okay? Hi, Dan, Joseph, Paul, Brian. How you guys doing? Hi, JJ. Everything's great. Okay, everything's working good. That's good to see. Hi, Apar. How's it going? Hey, neighbor. Man, we're having a super day today. Nice outside. Michael. Hi, Michael. Hello, Michael's friends, too. Michael's guest. Hello. Hi, Apar. What's up? Oh, okay. Um, what I wanted to talk about today, a couple different things. First of all, I wanted to talk about dial fonts. We've been thinking about dial fonts a lot lately for those of us who've been involved in the Etude number two, the Etude Guilloche project. And so I thought, well, this would be something. I've always loved fonts. Now, let me preface something that I think is important about fonts and watches. Fonts are part of another design. Hi, hater. If you have a font you like, and then you say, well, I'm going to use this and the design's going to look great, don't count on it. The best I can do in design is to follow some rules to have something that's not awful. I don't get anywhere near good. And that's why, e- even though I like a certain font, you'd have to have a whole design to go with it to make it look right. You take, for example, sort of the heritage look. There's a certain heritage like font that goes well with it. Other fonts don't. So that's what we're going to talk about, some of those things. Hey, football fan, how's it going? So let me start off with this. I don't know how, uh, when I was involved in publishing, we thought about fonts a lot. And initially, back in the old days when laser printers first became available, at the time I was doing development for Apple, and I was able to get a good deal on one of the early ones that they had. And I was just this was blown away by all these great fonts you could have with that. And one of the persons put out is that a lot of the early works that were done by people who had computers and had access to a laser printer was that they looked like ransom notes, and that's one thing I've always thought. Well, you don't want a watch that looks like a ransom note. Anyway, here are some fonts that I wanted to talk about, just sort of as an overview. Now, these three fonts, the W, the T, and the H, these are all called serif fonts, and they're serifs because they have these little tags on the end of them. They were originally developed to help in the you could use a smaller font with a serif in a book or some other publication, and so you could have on the same piece of paper you could have more information. This is why a lot of the old ones have these little tiny fonts, and they tend to be serif fonts that were developed for that. Now, sans serif fonts are ones like the A and the C, and the A and the C have no serifs on them. And it turned out, though, that people who are used to using serif fonts in paper publications were told that, you want to use the sans serif font with most text on screen because the digital difference was so great that I mean, I should say not the digital difference, but rather the what's called the DPI are it was like the number of points per, and it was like on paper it was several thousand. and on the screen it's like 72, something like that. But anyway, so you have it just turned out that these worked out better. Now, the different types of fonts, the one at the top is Bondini, and these are the names of old font designers from way back when. Now, the Futura is an Art Deco font, and a lot of the Art Deco was identified to a great extent with geographic or geometric, not geographic, but geometric text. Um, the one that's called Charlemagne, this one is more like a banner font or a headline font. I really like it a lot, but it's really to be used primarily for headers and things like that. It's an all caps font. I figured out a way though to you have taken the all caps and then simply use a smaller text size instead of have standing cap or small cap for that. The C is a Arial is a very common font. You probably have heard of Arial because was used a lot as a sans serif font in computers, and the uh, the 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 rounded version of it gives it a little more style than the plain version. And the one at the bottom is one of my favorite. It's called Watchman, and I like to use it a lot. It's sort of almost a brigade like font. Now, all of this right here is a monospace font. The name of this font is Courier New. It's simply a newer version of Courier. These fonts were developed for typewriters, and where all of the spacing and all of the amount of space used by each font had to be the same. And so, even though those were the initial purposes for them, they became used in a lot of different things for style. Now, in terms of fonts on watches, I brought out. Well, first of all, this one has indexes. It doesn't have any fonts at all. So I was looking. I didn't think I had any watches at all with just indexes, and then I realized that it was going through my case. It wasn't there. This is an example of a brigade font. And brigade fonts, I found out that they're each one has a slightly different style to it. I was told by our designer that for some reason they didn't have an off the shelf brigade font you could use with watches, and I don't know why, but that was what I was told. Here's another example. This is an Urban Jurgensen, and it also has the brigade font. One of the giveaways that at the brigade font is that at the tip of the four, let me see if you can see it on this one a little better. Yeah, there's almost like a little T with a on the four where it where the T crosses. I mean, where the line crosses on the four goes like this, and then there's a little T at the end of it, and so that's one of the ways you can spot a brigade font. Um, Now, the the two major fonts that are used, I mean, in bigger classes, are I should say the different types of numbers are Arabic numbers and Roman numbers. There are different types of Arabic numbers too, by the way. We use what we call the Arabic numbers as simply one of two major styles, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong on this one. And the here's this is my again, this is another font I don't have very many of. Uh, this was my Fabergé, and not only does it have Roman numeral fonts, it has them in two different sizes. It's got these little bitty ones that are the in between fonts. Let me see if I can point to it right here. They're little bitty ones, and then the ones at 12, 3, 6, and 9 are the big ones. And they're also italicized. A very unusual kind of font. I don't have any regular Roman numeral watches. This one has Roman numerals, but they are so incredibly stylized you have a ring in the middle there, and below the ring you can see the tips of these Roman numerals, and they the they're part though of a larger design. There's another one called the this is another Roman numeral, and it's it's a only half of it has the top half has Roman numerals. The bottom has nothing. I figured, you know, uh, it has. I guess it's sort of centered around the moon phase. That's sort of on the wane right now. But maybe they figure, well, at night at the bottom. I have no idea why they decided not to put anything at the bottom. There are fonts. There are fonts like this. I think I have one. I mean, there are dials. See if I can find it. Yes, here it is. This is called a California dial that has two different fonts on it. Um, it was actually, I think it was originally fonts that were done by our styles of dials that was done by Rolex, and they're called California dials. At the top is Roman numerals, and at the bottom is Arabic numbers. Some of them have the opposite, the Arabic at the top and the Roman numerals at the bottom. But anyway, these are some different fonts on that. Now, um, some of them are sort of minimal fonts or minimal numbers, and they'll have like one number, and then the rest will be indexes, like this harboring to Felix. There's a 12 at the top, which is a very very much of an Art Deco font. I love Art Deco fonts. Somebody today, I think it was who was it that sent me one? They sent me a picture of a watch with these Art Deco. I mean, like from the 1920s. What a beautiful, beautiful job they had done on that. This is also when we had our watch made. Our watch, our designer wanted to have an Art Deco font, and this is one he developed for us. Now, originally, the 8 was very different. Well, 8 pretty much covered up by the subdial, but it had like a big top and a little bitty bottom, but they couldn't use it because on the back where they put the number of the watch in relationship to the number of, I think it was out of 70s. If you had like um 28 out of 70, the 8 the bottom loop was so small that they couldn't engrave it. So it was sort of a funny kind of thing. Excuse me. Now, I think the important thing to understand though is that fonts, I don't know whether the design, you set up a design and you have a certain style font. Or one thing I do know, you need a certain style watch to make it work. Um, this, the rest of the style of this watch, it's a very, relatively speaking, it's a plain one. But with everything else in it, um, you look at this and there's nothing that says, something's weird with that. And but when I see this, they say a lot's weird with it. That's why I like it so much. Anyway, those are some of the fonts, and I thought I'd throw it out. Let's see what you got here. Nomos uses a very cool font. My Bluni Zodiac. Yeah. Now Bauhaus is often connected up with Art Deco, both minimalist and uh, geometric on that. Hi, Wing Jupiter. Okay, Bella. Oh, you've got to watch with a California dial. Yeah, I don't know why, but I really like those. There's something cool about them. We got Nomos fans. Apar. Apar, that's right. It was Apar who showed me this wonderful, wonderful um, font from the 1920s, I think. They had those. That was an error. That really great font. I had a friend who was really into German poster art in the 1920s and 1930s, and they were very much into both Bauhaus and to Art Deco, and they had some incredible fonts. Had a lot of fun with them. Hey, Mason, and other news. Hello, folks. Hey, Casey. Is the Rolex Hulk the greatest watch ever made? I, it is for Rolex fans, maybe, but I don't know of people outside of that cult think so. Is Girard-Perregaux a garbage watch? Not any more than the Hulk, I wouldn't say. Girard-Perregaux, there's a lot of good things about Girard-Perregaux. Girard-Perregaux, you got to remember, a lot of the movements in some of the top watches were by Girard-Perregaux. Anyway, uh, Casey, we're not here to trash watches, okay? Or we're not here to worship them either. We're here to talk about them. What is the font that Hermes uses? That is unique. Hermes has at least two that I know of. Hermes fonts are they had a designer design them for them. They're very unique. I like Hermes fonts a lot. They seem to have two different ones that they use on their watches. Hey, flippin' Zippo. Hey, Paul. Okay, let's see. Not a fan of Roman numerals, but the numerals on the Roger Dubuis sympathy is striking. Yeah, what there was another watch style, Brian, that came after this on the Roger Dubuis. I think what it was called, but it was like I think they turned these Roman numerals into sort of radical looking indexes. I forgot the name of the watch, but anyway, yeah, Hermes probably the ones with numbers cut through in the middle. Yeah, they have that hater, and they have the Excalibur. That's right. That's the one I was thinking of. Brian, this kind of style I think became the Excalibur. Put it together on that. Okay. Shall we talk about the greatest movements? Let me start off with hi Mike from Glasgow. How is Glasgow? Love the brigade font, timeless and classic. I agree. Um, let's talk about movements now. That was the other part that we were supposed to talk about. Um, do any of you own and or have read um, George Daniels' Watchmaking? I know a lot of people have it. I haven't met that many people who read it. Um, the Flip and Zippo, we're going over the movements now. Okay. All right. I don't know if you realize this, hater, but did you? Every watch in that book is key wound. Uh, George Daniels doesn't like uh, the keyless works. He thinks that the crown has messed up the the design, and so he very much rails against it. And so all of the watches in that book are key wound. So that's one thing. So I suppose we might suggest, or perhaps the very best ones are key wound watches because they don't have to monkey around with with the keyless works. I do like the ones with crowns so I can wind them up myself. I also would probably say, if you're talking about the greatest movements, the ones that are hand wound rather than automatic. I have automatics, and in fact, my newest favorite one is an automatic with a Frederick Piguet movement. I found out about it, and it works wonderfully well. But um, what makes a good movement? Now, let me say at the outset that, yeah, I know about silicone hairsprings, and I know why they're good. But I also know about smartwatches that are 1,000 times better in terms of timekeeping. So for now, why don't we just talk about mechanical watches? Um, for you Rolex fans, one thing I am so glad that Rolex did is keep the Parachrome hairspring, and it's a very good hairspring. And I would say that becomes important. Two hairsprings, the Parachrome and the Strawman hairsprings, I think are two key hairsprings. The one is of course made by Rolex. The other one is made by um, Precision Engineering, which is part of H. Moser. And the reason that I like both of those hairsprings, they use a compound of niobium and either titanium, that would be the H. Moser version, or chromium, it would be the Rolex version of it. This one has the Strawman hairspring, I found out not too long ago. And it was also one of the reasons that H. Moser bought an interest in, well, that's not why they bought an interest in it so they could keep getting those, what are they called? Agongraph? No, that's not the name of it. They're um, the Agonor chronograph. What's the name of that? I forgot it. Anyway, so that would be one thing, is to have a hairspring, a good non-silicon, non-magnetic hairspring. So that would be one thing in a good movement. And the H. Mosers all have them, and all of the Rolexes have the Parachrome hairspring. Okay, um, another thing I think that's important for us to take a look at is, oh, sorry I missed that. Oh, see you, Michael. Thanks for coming by. Hey, James. Trying to figure out what's the. No, that I already got that one figured out. Thanks, though, James. It's the God. I think I get it. It's the Frederick Piguet 1050, I believe, is the name of it, of the movement. Got it figured out. Okay, let's go back to here to other things that are in movements that are make them good. I like low hertz. Why do I like a low hertz? Lots of reasons. The main reason is it doesn't beat up the the parts as much. Um, it has a one of the reasons that the guy who makes the Akiriva watches, Rex Heck Rehepi, he said you can watch it, you can see the movement of it better. Um, your top watchmakers, from George Daniels to his protege, God, what's his name? Um, Roger Smith, Kari Voutilainen. They all have this slower uh, frequency. And the thing that was important to me is that what do I know? I was just a Rudy Poo collector. These guys know a lot. And so I listen to people who know a lot. I'll put it that way. Um, a large balance wheel. I love large balance wheels. because of the inertia. Inertia is one of the greatest forces around. And so once that thing gets going, then comes back again, you're going to have something that it has greater inertia, which means it's harder to interfere with its movement. Now, um, one of my favorite watches that I just had on recently has a micro rotor in it. And one of the problems with a micro rotor is that in order to make room for the micro rotor, you have to have smaller balance wheels. So you don't have to, but oftentimes that's usually what happens. The purpose of a micro rotor is to keep your watch thin, and the only way to keep it thin is that you can't put up another level for a large balance wheel. So you try to put everything down on the same deck. Anyway, okay, let's see what you guys have to say. How does Larique compare to Rolex? I don't know. How does a handmade watch by one of the greatest watchmakers in the world, the company Agenor, compare to one that makes millions of watches a year? What are the best watch brands in the 8,000 to 14,000? Rolex, of course. Why Rolex, of course? I like Rolex, but why, of course? To me, what about Hermes? They own a big hunk of or even better. What about here's the one? What about this? The Harboring Two. The Harboring Two. You have Richard Harboring again. Another. Not only is he a a top notch watchmaker. I think he's won 4 or 5 Grand Prix awards. Now, one thing that uh, Larique and Rolex have in common, neither one of us won a Grand Prix award. Okay. In 2007, Rolex put up a couple of their watches. They didn't even make it to the first base on it. Rolex has a good process for making watches that are, good, reliable tool watches. They've got no problem with that at all. But the extent to which some people it's a religion. If that's all you know about, then you don't know too much. Okay, Bentley versus Toyota Corolla. Toyota Corolla makes very good cars. Bentley's a little different. Rolex, of course, because they retain their value. Okay, now that's another thing. If you're looking for value retention, yeah, 2 watches that have great value retention are Rolex and Patek Philippe. First week I was collecting watches, I learned that lesson. Okay, but what do you have in terms of horology? There's some very good things, and one of the ironies is that some of the best horology that came out of Rolex they've canceled. For example, I think one of the most beautiful movements they made. A, it was hand wound. B, it was a shape movement. They had a nice big balance wheel in it. It was 3 hertz instead of 4. It was a beautiful one, and that was the Prince. But of course, the Rolex that wasn't that popular with them. Same thing happened with the Yachtmaster 2. I just saw somebody was reviewing Rolexes, and she said, "Oh, of course, the Rolex, the Yachtmaster 2 is no, that's no good," and blah 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 blah, because they don't like the looks of it. That has one of the most interesting pieces of horology in a countdown movement of any watch. It's a beautiful watch, but Rolex fans, it, not all of them, but they if you spend your time worrying about resale value, you forget about horology, and that's a shame because there's a lot more to learn about, including Rolex. Learn about your own watches. There's sort of like a chant, you know, rather than knowledge. So get your knowledge up on that and join the row on it. My goal is to buy and sell watches and make money. Then you can do it with Rolex. But don't try to tell people about horology, okay? Just tell them you got a really good watch that takes it that works well, that other people respect who don't know too much about horology anyway, but other people respect, and you have a great watch. I don't know. It's like there's it shouldn't be a religion, okay? I often I often think that if if we came from Mars, let's say, and we wanted to report on the Earth religion, and we ran into let's say Scientology and uh, uh, archery Zen Buddhism, and talked about them, and in a way, I think we would learn a lot more about the religions that way than if we talked about them from some perspective of a religion. Would I agree that Richard Mille is at the top of the mountain? My God, he gets a lot of money for his watches. Tell me about the horology, for crying out loud. From what I understand, he makes one. The person to me who is probably, and I'll get some disagreement on that, who's probably way up there, very near the top, is Roger Smith. His watches are beautiful. I also think anything by Marco Lang is as well. Kari Voutilainen, uh, Jean-Marc Viderec, these guys, at Richard Habring. When they want to do something, for example, uh, when we went to get our watch, we went to Agenor. They made a new movement for us. I mean, and you hear companies like IWC, like Breitling, like Panerai. Oh, we can't. It's so expensive to make a movement. We have a movement in here that's our own. Oh, well, yeah, it is an ETA, but whereas we got a brand new movement. I don't know when the last time, too many watch come, especially they only made 70 of them. And so you have things like that, but I don't think that scarcity itself or limited editions is a good criteria any more than money is. Um, there are two reasons that you have limited editions to a watch. One is to keep the price up. Okay, well, it's a limited edition, so it must be much better. The second reason is that it takes so many resources to make them, you can't make a whole lot of them. And that's the kind of limited edition that I think would be the most interesting. H. Moser is jealous? I don't think so. Roman Sharp flips Milnes and makes bank and first fist bumps and gets. I don't know who they are. I tell you, Hugh. Anyway, you haven't said anything about the horology yet. I mean, what is it that Say something about the horology. You've been talking about people making fist bumps, how much they can sell for. What about the horology? Say one thing about it. That is what makes it outstanding. Um, Hater, there's another one, Philippe Dufour, beautiful watches, um, by someone who doesn't make very many because it takes a very long time to make one of those watches. Hi, Donald. I don't know. I think some people can pay a whole lot of money and not get much horology for it. I'll put it that way. Okay, hey, lease time. How you doing? We're hanging in there. Okay. All right. So, what are some other things that make for a good movement? I've given my thoughts are a big balance wheel, a lower frequency. What else? All Longo watch would go for a couple hundo. Oh, you mean the escapement mason? Are you talking about the escapement or the something like a remontoir égalité? Paul likes the finishing. This is where Philippe Dufour's his finishing is just amazing. Power reserve. Yeah, okay, yeah. Thomas, maybe that's what my son was asking about, power reserve. Hey, Alexander, what is the price difference between standard ETA and other stages, elaborate and top grade? One of the things is that Alexander, neighbor, they use the higher grades have better shock absorbers, which I thought was funny. I was looking at the list of the different grades of ETAs. The top grade is COSC, and one question: does magnetic equal non-ferrous? Boy, that's a good question. Um, Gee, that's a really good question, Flippo. I don't know the answer. Anybody know the answer to that one? I was thinking the reason I'm wondering because I don't know whether niobium is ferrous or not, or chromium, titanium, are all of those non-ferrous or ferrous? Does ferrous refer to the amount of iron in them? I'm just not sure, to tell you the truth on that, but that's a good point. Constant force, absolutely. That is I think is extremely important. Remontoir égalité. Yeah, that's it. Now, what that is, and again, that's one of the things that football fan pointed out is constant force. And what it does is that between the mainspring and the escapement, you have another spring that's a weaker spring that winds up and unwinds like every minute or every 12 minutes or whatever. And the reason for that is that it provides a constant force, whereas a mainspring, as it unwinds, it starts losing its power, and so you have a sinkage amount. That's another thing I think. I think in general, constant force. What are some main things in constant force? One thing is where you have parallel double barrel. That's another thing I really like. Chronometer surveying, FP Journe's Chronometer surveying has the double barrels in parallel. Most double barrels are for maintaining lengthening the charge on it, or the power reserve. They're serial. Well, Dan, you certainly can tell if they're well finished. Do we overrate movement, decorations, finishing? Do they influence our buying decisions? Um, that's a good point, Mike. That's a really good point. I know that what is it called? The Society for Higher Horology, or whatever it's called, the one that, anyway, uh, they have finishing as one of the criteria for high horology. And you take the harboring twos. They have very functional finishing. In other words, that you have enough englaze so that pieces of metal don't fall into the movement. But other than that, the finishing is very, very um, minimal in that sense. Other ones have this is this was some of the best engraving I've seen anywhere is on the rotor of this thing. Why they have this closed case on it so you can't see it, but when I took some close-up pictures of the movement, I got they have this imperial eagle spread out on the thing. Crazy. Hey, Owen. There's such a thing as ferromagnetic metals. Ah, that's it. Titanium is important when it comes to having a MRI as non-ferromagnetic structures compatible with scaling and imperviousness, I guess. Thank you, Owen. That I didn't know. The question about various metals, I think, is those kinds of things I think are important for us to ask, because then we can ask about some more of the right questions. Well, what is this made of? Well, it's made of a non-ferrous metal. Well, what metal is that? Those kinds of things I think are great things. I like a watch with a movement, with a constant force movement, a remontoire, or even a Fusée and chain, but expensive. Yeah. I think, who was it that had one? Somebody else that we talked about not too long ago, that wasn't crazy expensive. Had the dual the dual barrels in parallel. Oh my God, hater! Yes, that's one thing. This is a wonderful watch, but winding it is like a workout in the gym. It's very hard to wind. I'm not sure why. Uh, One of my early watches was a Patek Philippe Calatrava, and that thing was a wonderful one to wind. And the only one that I found is anywhere near it is Etude number one, and that's because of the AGH 6801 caliber movement they put in there for us. Fantastic wind on that. There was something else too. I got it here somewhere. There it is. One thing we did with our watch, it wasn't COSC, um, and so some of us, myself included, we had it tested for chronometer status on it. They took my watch. This is a Horological Society of New York certified chronometer thing. For 15 days, they took the poor watch and ran it through the ringer, not with just the movement, but a case movement, and it passed, which was very happy to find out about. But that's another thing that besides COSC, there's a French one at the Observatory of Besançon, and there's one that Omega uses called Metas, and there's some other ones, I think. I don't know what it costs to have it done by Besançon, but I would like to have one done there, because what they have is that if you pass it, they have a serpent's head for a stamp on it. And I thought, well, that'd be cool just to have a old serpent's head stamp from Besançon. It's an observatory in France, and that's how your chronometers are really your I guess the sort of pre-computers that they had. What they would do is that they would time your watch against the planetary movement, and which they knew would move at a certain rate, and your watch had to keep that rate in order to make it through the chronometer thing. Rome, Ronan, that's right. Eitan Schwartz. Eitan Schwartz. I probably said it terribly wrong. They also have ones. They have some very cool watches. They have this one movement they made, and you have a choice, I think, of one or two barrels. If they have two barrels, the second barrel is in parallel with the first one, and then they have another thing for it. But that is one of the most underrated watches around. Thank you, Mike. You have the Bambino. That's a good one. Look, guys, I tell you, I'm sorry I've gone over a bit. Um, Hugh, what Marco are you talking about? If I were to win the lottery, I would try to get a hold of a Richard Lang pour le Merit. That's a nice one. Very nice one. By the way, we had one. We found an Alanga Lang one. I think how much for about half price. Um, it was an older one, but not that much older. And so you can put. That's another thing too, is finding some really good buys on these things. Arnold and Son has had a constant force 2-barrel tourbillon with a remontoir. Anyway, guys, listen, I want to thank you all for putting up with me today. And thank you for your contributions. It's good to see uh some new people and new voices. And welcome, welcome, welcome. Drop on by next week. Take care.